Hello and a big welcome to the Disability And podcast. I'm Dow's founding editor, Colin Hambrook, and for this month we had the pleasure of recording a conversation between Dow journalist Will Reynolds and Caimh CK McDonnell, the Irish author of darkly comic crime thrillers and humorous paranormal fantasy. Caimh's wife Elaine Ofori also joined us, and together they talk about their independent publishing company, its output, disability, political correctness, and the reasons why Caimh has given up stand-up comedy for dog walking.
Hi, I'm with Elaine and Caimh, who are the brains behind the McFory Inc. publishing company and the Bunny books. Thank you guys for joining me. It's very kind of you to find the time.
No worries.
Thank you for inviting us.
I suppose we better start with what led you to books and kind of going from stand-up, because I know Caimh was stand-up before going into writing, and then and Elaine, you've sort of become everything in a publishing company. Are you everything? Do you do sort of all of the things?
Not quite. I wish I were truly that talented, but no, we do have other people that we work with.
Yeah. Although having said that, she is now also going to be an author. So basically, we have written a book together, but very unusually, it is set in Germany, in Cologne. Because we had the idea while we were over there doing promo stuff, because the Stranger Times and actually our publisher over there, Eichborn, have now brought the Bunny books out in German as well, or they're bringing them out. I think they're up to the second one now. So yeah, they're working their way through those as well. And we literally came up with this idea and ended up writing it, and it's going to come out in German next year. And then we haven't figured out the English side of things yet. That's still very up in the air. It definitely will.
Oh, so it's.
Yes, it's coming out in German. We didn't
It's
write
going to get published in
Germany first. Yes,
I was going to say, wow,
yeah, no.
talent.
No.
Just, okay.
No.
I have basic Duolingo German, so unless the book is aimed at 2-year-olds,
dogs that play piano seem to be something, as she could say, which has not come up yet, unfortunately. But yeah, basically, we wrote it there, and because it's set in Germany and stuff. It's genuinely, when we're over there, like they were talking to the publishers, and they honestly think it's never really. I think the impression we got was that it never really happened before. Would that be right, Lo? That basically someone from this part of the world has written a book set in Germany that's going to come out in German first is a very unusual, almost unprecedented, apparently.
You wrote it in English,
yeah.
Then had someone translate it into German, and then you're going to translate it back into English, or.
We'll have the German version translated into German. The English version will remain in English and will eventually be published in English as it stands, once it's gone through the various stages of copy editing, etc., and proofreading. Then it'll be published in English.
It's effectively going through the same thing the Stranger Times go through, in that it's going to be edited in English. Like Elaine's now getting our editors are the Germans, but they're giving us notes in English. Then our normal line editor, which is the sort of technical, real sort of nitty-gritty editing, is going to be the same brilliant lady, Rebecca, who always does it. And then it'll get translated actually by the same translator in Germany who does all the other books as well, who's a good friend of ours, Andre. So
I suppose that means you've got to find people for the German audiobook.
They'll take care of that. We won't have to worry.
I won't get into the sort of nitty-gritty of sort of, I don't know, roaming the streets of Cologne going, do you have a nice voice?
Yeah, no, we don't. I mean, the other problem we have is that we have to still figure this out. Is it's basically it's a team of 17, 18-year-old girls in Cologne. We basically took a kind of Cologne, I guess you'd call it a myth, effectively. I mean, it's not technically involves a Saint Ursula, which is technically a religious thing, but not really. And we just basically changed the entire myth because we didn't like how the original worked, and we made it into a more modern day thing. And it's so again, this really makes no sense to you actually read the book, but because of that, there's lots of girls that are based in Germany, and we have no idea. That's one of the things we discussed about for the English audiobook. It doesn't really make sense to just give everyone a German accent, so we're going to have to figure out some way of doing them. Like, do we actually just give them accents? Like, is one of them a Scouser or something? I honestly don't know how we're going to manage it.
That sounds so fun. I know I had a go at trying to guess the myth that you were going with, and I kind of wanted it to be the Lorelei thing, but that was also because I just read the Rivers of London, and then I thought, oh, that would be fun because then you could have international rivers talking to each other and blah blah blah.
I think Ben Arana got that covered because he's got a short story that's set in Trier.
Oh yeah, which we were at. Yeah, no, and we went to Cologne for a week doing research, and our publishers basically bringing us around. We got to see a nuclear bunker, which I'll be honest, sounded like it was going to be fun. Ended up being really quite terrifying. When you actually imagine this place being full of people, it's genuinely the most terrifying. Like, God Almighty. Especially bear in mind what's happening in the news recently. It didn't feel like it was history so much as you want it to be. But outside of that, though, we love Germany and we had a great time. So,
but also you were over there for a research trip in the middle of the Euros, which must have been
yeah. The timing wasn't as good as it could have been.
Yeah.
We had tried to coincide with with Relight My Fire coming out in Germany, so that we could do a launch event. That was the plan, and Relight My Fire came out on the 28th of June. So initially we were going to go 4 days prior to the launch, which would have had us in Cologne when England played. Was it Slovenia or Slovakia?
I think it was actually the night England played Slovakia was when we would have had the launch event. Was it Slovakia? I can't remember which one of them.
It might have been the week before. But yeah, the day we were due to fly out was also the day that Manchester Airport had a bit of a meltdown and no planes left. It was a bit of fortuitous timing, really, that we realised the Euros was on and we had to change.
Also in that regard, is a random piece of travel advice that's very specific. Do not travel in Germany when Germany's in a knockout match and it goes to penalties, because it turns out, particularly in the airports, a lot of the staff aren't doing the jobs they should be. And it turns out we very nearly missed our flight because there was no Lufthansa staff where we expected them to be. It was very stressful on the way home.
That sounds about right. Yeah, I've got some mates from Hamburg, and they just said the whole country just basically shut down if you didn't like football.
But just to go back to the earlier question about how did we end up setting up our own publishing company. Yes, I always think, I'm convinced Caimh was playing a long game. It was very strategic, clearly very, very strategic. Because when we first met, I was an editor and I was working for different publishing houses. And then I decided I was going to change careers and I was going to go into PR. So we moved to Manchester so I could do my master's in PR. And I got a part-time job working for what is essentially the agency that promotes Manchester as a tourist and business destination. So I ended up working in marketing, and that was my part-time job whilst I was doing my master's, but realised I loved marketing so much that that's what I wanted to do. And I think that he was just like, oh, hang on a minute. So she can do PR, she can do marketing, and she's an editor.
Yeah.
If I write a book, essentially, she has the entire skill set that I need, to get this over the line. Yeah. So that's kind of how it came about. But prior to that, we had looked at the traditional route into publishing, and you'd had agents read what became A Man with One of Those Faces, and one piece of feedback we received was that it was too Irish and it was too funny.
I paid someone for that piece of that golden nugget, which, to be fair, we've now mentioned in so many interviews, it has now paid for itself tenfold.
I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah,
but as a thing, put that on the back of every book you ever write.
Yeah, put beside me and selling. That'll
genius.
Nice little piece of
One thing that I was going to say is, do you think that you're able to write such an Irish book because you're away from home?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's like it's a huge part of my life. I was back in Dublin last week, and I'm out there all the time, sort of thing. I still work where my family is, so yeah, it is. But I've been living over here at the same time for a long time, and it is kind of weirdly like my way of going home. And also, I think it sort of gives me the distance because I love Ireland in many, many ways. But I also know it well enough to see the flaws in it. And, I have that sort of distance where I can point them out. while at the same time obviously having great affection for my home country. So I think that sort of blends well, where it gives you that kind of distance, and it's sort of, I enjoy writing the Irish stuff, but at the same time, like the bunny book I'm just finishing now, Fortunate Son, is actually mainly set in London. Actually, Bunny goes over to London because he needs to try and sort something out for somebody. It's certainly the distance, I think, is good for the books. I'd hope, yeah.
So, how do you sort of like go about actually building a book? Because I mean, is it different for Stranger Times and the Bunny books?
So yeah, it's kind of the same thing. The Stranger Times is generally more involved because there's a lot more characters in it. And like, I basically put everything up on a board beside me where I'm sitting right now, and there's, all the different cards, and I have to do that for the Stranger Times because it's literally swapping from this person to this person to this person. There's a lot going on, which you also kind of get in the McGarry Stateside books. There's a lot going on in some of them as well.
I love how you write the Bunny books. They're so cinematic. I'm just sitting there sort of listening to Morgan and just kind of going, and I can see it more than pretty much any other series of books. It's amazing. I don't know like how you managed to do that.
Well, thanks. I mean, first off, Morgan does an incredible job, which obviously helps, as does Brendan on the other side with the Stranger Times. But I think it's the reason I come from effectively a TV writing background, in the sense that I was for years trying to get away with TV. So I literally for like a decade, almost everything I read was scripts. Like literally, I have every script book under the sun upstairs in boxes since we've moved, because I just read scripts and read scripts and read scripts. And then when I ended up swapping to writing a book, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I did know my way around a script. So things like dialogue and stuff. Dialogue generally drives my books, and it always has done in all of them, because it's the way I sort of naturally work. And I think the thing I learned when trying to write a book is I typically don't like long pages of people talking about descriptions of things and stuff anyway. I mean, some authors do it brilliantly. Ben Aranovich, for example, it works because he's got a real affection for London, and he talks about he's fascinated by London, and there's a real excitement and energy to what he's doing when he does it. So I think it works when he does it. But a lot of other times I feel like you're just getting somebody just trying to put in as much detail as possible. And honestly, I think people fill the pictures themselves, especially if the characters are alive and they're, doing things and being active and have agency. So I guess how my style developed was from the fact that I knew how to write dialogue, and the rest I kind of figured out as I went. So I think that's probably how it went that way. And then we got very lucky where we found good narrators who were able to work with that kind of thing and really just go full on and give it the full performance that we think works best for it, I think.
I've really tried to not make this into a Stu Goldsmith interview and kind of go, are you happy? Are you happy? Have you completed comedy? Are you all right?
I wouldn't say I've completed comedy.
I really hope. Yeah, but do you actually, that is a thing. Do you not get the itch at all?
For comedy, just be clear. No.
We meditated all other itches.
Yeah,
it's
no,
fine.
we can't go into that now. But yeah, no, I mean, stand-up, it's weird that, because people always ask me about that. And honestly, I miss stand-up comedians, because they were sort of like, weirdly, the social life comes with the job when I was doing that for so long. And then literally I had to find a social life when I started realize after a while when I was writing that I was just staying in my house. But no, I was a stand-up for a long time. I loved it. I got incredible life experiences out of it, met some amazing people. But honestly, I started writing became a bigger thing, and I didn't have the mental space for stand-up. And I just didn't want to be somebody that was still hanging around doing stand-up when someone might see me 3 years later and I'm doing the same stuff, because my head wasn't really there anymore. My head was in the Bunny books, and the Stranger Times at that point as well was also coming along line. And frankly, I'm a better writer than I was a stand-up comedian. And to be fair, like if someone said, do you miss playing the comedian? Oh, God, yeah. But do I miss doing Jongleurs Anywhere? No. Do I miss doing driving 300 miles for a shitty gig? No, I don't. I love my time in stand-up. And like even in the last few years when I was doing stand-up, I was mainly doing supports for Sarah Millican and Gary Delaney. And you kind of get spoiled doing them because they're great gigs. I'm hanging out with mates of mine. And then you go back to ordinary circuit gigs and they're not the Apollo, which is I literally did the Apollo with Sarah. It was absolutely true. And then I was driving home the next day I did a gig in Leamington Spa where I used to live for a mate of mine, Oxy. And it was like to 20 people, most of whom didn't realize comedy was going to be on, and they were just ignorant. And normally I'm great in those. Normally I'm great in the shit environment because I can talk to people and get them in, and sort of I can work the room. Like it's always why me and Gary Delaney got put on the same gigs, because Gary was one-liners and I was more of a diverse skill set where I could like chat to people and stuff. But that gig went shit, and a part of it was my brain was going, you did the Apollo last night. I just can't be arsed trying to get this gig to work. And I genuinely annoyed myself when I was driving home, because I thought I should have tried something more there maybe. But yeah, it was literally that situation. And look, by not being a stand-up anymore, I get to have dogs now. And genuinely nothing, as my wife's laughing now, I'll make that swap every day of the week. I love those dogs. So yeah.
But it's that weird thing, like, because I think you can really see your stand-upness. You write in gags, and that's amazing because you don't. But it's weird because you don't write in gags.
Yeah, I think it's sort of, there's nothing like, I always think if you pull out, you can't like pull out certain lines and sort of say, oh, this is funny, because almost everything is frankly funny in context, because it's funny because of who's saying it in the situation they're in. Which is, I think, because I think if you're trying to put a gag in, that's where you go wrong. Whereas I think genuinely, I think that's why writing suits me better, frankly, than stand-up did, because it takes the me out of it, if you like, where I can create these characters and then they can be put into these situations and stuff. Whereas with stand-up, kind of by necessity, everything's coming from your perspective and stuff, and you have to sort of, you can do it, and like amazing people do it, but like you have to build a backstory, and that's hard to do in front of a live audience. I mean, that's not to say it can't. Look, I think stand-up's incredible, and watching someone who's genuinely great at stand-up is an amazing, unreplaceable sort of incredible experience. But I was good at. I mean, I was a solid stand-up. I was decent. I made a good career out of it and stuff. But I don't think I was ever at the top level. I don't think I was ever kind of that thing. But just look, there's no shame in that. There's it's like, there's how many footballers play in England, and only 11 of them get to turn out for England, sort of thing. But yeah, I was still good at it, and I enjoyed it. But I enjoy writing more because it feels like there are no restraints. I can do whatever I want, literally. I can write whatever the hell I like. I mean, even when you see how I've written the books, where I've not done them in any kind of like normal order and stuff, because I've just done whatever the hell I wanted to. Yeah, Elaine's not the keen on it.
Yeah, not that I'm saying that is the way to do things, but that's how it materialized.
Was it accidental that you've actually become, probably, to my knowledge anyways, the person that is currently writing disability the best?
Well, I mean, thank you very much. People have said stuff like that a few times and stuff, and it's very nice. I'll be honest, I feel like a bit of a fraud because every time people sort of say that kind of stuff, I just think, well, I guess there are people with various disabilities. But I mean, it sounds really almost cliched and simple, but you don't write somebody with disability. That is one facet of somebody's life, but it is not the defining thing. As you don't need to explain to you, you obviously know this far better than I do. But it's just always how I've written people, and it's not even like I'm trying to put these things in as some sort of being terribly woke, as some right-wing person will put it. It's not that I'm even trying to do that. It's just when you're writing something, you want the most diverse bunch of people you can, because if you want a character to come alive, you don't want people to be confusing them with somebody else. You don't want the clashes. You want them to be distinctive. And how you do that is you make them as genuinely distinctive as possible. And it's just a natural way that you sort of, and I don't even really think about it now. I mean, like even the Ursula book, there's someone who's a sign language user as their only form of communication and stuff. But that was, again, we were just trying to find different ways of making these people interesting. And we came up with the idea, and it was like, oh, well, this is a different thing. It's quite an interesting way of doing it. We genuinely did have the thing. We actually came up with something which is a nice solution to it. But we did have the moment where we went, oh, hang on. We can't ever describe them signing anything, because sign language in German is different to sign language in English. We actually found a clever way around it, which was that part of her, because they're magic, they all have magical powers, and part of her power is it links to what she actually has as a power, which I won't explain now, but she can make herself understood by somebody in any, so she basically, whatever she's signing, she can make somebody understand it just by touching them, and then they understand what she's saying.
I just on the diversity and inclusivity point, you write what you know, you write the world around you, and you know, there are just so many different types of people in the world, and I think to write something that precludes a whole group of people is just absurd, because that's we don't live in bubbles. That's how I see it.
So from my point of view, like, I mean, I'm 30 and I'm still often like somebody's first disabled person or whatever. Is that something that you've just not really had to have? Have you just kind of grown up around people with disability, or is it just that you just don't, like, you're a nice guy, people are just people? Is it that, or is it just that,
I mean,
you've like lived, I don't know, like,
no,
because it just sort of baffles me that you're able to, like, I don't know, write autism so well as well. Like, Rosie's perfect.
Well, I mean, again, I think I deliberately avoided using that word at any point in that book. But yeah, it is. I mean, that was just those kind of things. Maybe you can, hopefully we're all getting a bit better at understanding these things. But I mean, the great thing, to be fair, part of it is the stand-up circuit is a wonderfully diverse place. So you meet loads of different people. Like, I don't think I've ever told Elaine this story, but this is years ago, before it was the hot button topic it is now, which is becoming tremendously tedious. I did a gig once where there was this was like an open spot. So there was, we had two trans women in a row. Because you know that thing when you're a stand-up, there's always that thing about you don't want to clash with somebody else on the bill. Because you're always like, so when you're starting off as an Irish comic, you're worried if there's someone else Irish on. And then actually when you figure out your voice and stuff, you really don't care anymore, because you shouldn't be overlapping with them, or else you're not very good at what you do, because then you're just doing a bit too basic. But this was a thing where there was like 10-minute open spots. And because people didn't realize this, back to back, there was two trans women on. And like the second one was like, you can genuinely see her struggling going, I'll be honest, I mainly spent most of the time talking about what she just did. And it was, and it was an extraordinarily weird experience. I think especially because the first one sort of weirdly, in a kind of really nice way, it kind of became a questions and answer session with the audience, which was, people just asking questions and she was happy to answer them. And again, this is it's weird how it just sort of became a hot button issue in the last, 5-6 years, whatever it is. But this was genuinely a nice audience. People actually were genuinely curious to ask questions, which they probably wouldn't now for fear of, getting everything wrong and, social media and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it is that. But my point is that's an example of how diverse the stand-up circuit at its best could be. So I guess that's part of it. You get used to meeting a lot of different people and stuff. I came over to this country, I was completely out of my element. So I, you get used to having to kind of meet more people. I mean, I've got some contact with disability in my everyday life, been in our family and stuff, but not that much. I think it's just, again, it's a very basic thing. Just treat people as people. It doesn't feel like it's a very special thing to do, but I think some authors avoid generally representing different groups because they're genuinely scared of there being a backlash or something. I can remember when I was first in London and there was a Sikh girl who worked with me in London, and we were all out. And people always ask, it's weird, by the way, this is a segue, but people always ask the difference between working in Ireland and England, because I worked in IT in both places. And weirdly, by the way, genuinely, the drink culture, not in the way everyone would think in the lazy cliche. In Ireland, in Britain, people went out for a pint at lunchtime all the time. When I worked in Ireland, nobody did that. That was unheard of. You don't drink when you're still at work. That just didn't happen. But bizarrely, people in England did. But then on the other end of it, if you went out on the Friday night, in Ireland, it was considered very, very bad form to talk about work beyond like 6 o'clock. Like, we're out of work now. We finished work. Stop talking about work. Whereas in London, people would just talk to you about their fucking project all night. We were out one night with this thing, and there was a Sikh girl. I kind of knew she was she didn't work on my team. She was a project manager or something. But I asked her about the Sikh. Because I've not known any Sikh. She explained it to me, and all these other English people seized up And like to the point where you could feel it round the table. And to her credit, she just went, he's just asked me, he's interested in my culture. That's a perfectly nice question. Because they're all like, oh my God, you can't ask someone about their religion. It's like, yes, you can. It's like you can mention someone's color, race, religion, all these things. You just, as long as you're doing it the right way and your intention, even if you get it wrong, if your intention is good, you should hopefully be okay. Um, and and I guess that, and it's the same with disability. You know, obviously, there's a barrier there for people because they're scared of talking to somebody and stuff. But if you find a way through that, then it's great for everybody because you can relax. And you know, and then.
But that's the stand-up in you, I think.
Maybe so, yeah.
Because it's that thing with stand-up. If you can joke about anything if you do it right, and I don't mean like the Ricky Gervais style,
that
being a shit, but essentially you can talk about anything on stage.
Every time I hear someone say, "Oh, you can't say this and that anymore," you always go, "Okay, just list the things you can't say." And then you go, and like, if they generally won't. And if they do, you go, okay, yeah, you could never say those things. Not since, you know, not unless you were wearing a frilly shirt and and it was the comedians and whatever, the 1970s on television. And even then they didn't do most of their racist stuff wasn't done. But the reality is you couldn't ever really do those things. And it's just a popular thing now to say that, oh, you can't say anything anymore. Because of course you can. You just have to be prepared to defend what you say, which is kind of what you have to do anyway. But it's also, as a stand-up comedian, it's really easy. If you have to look around the room and see who's in the room before you tell a joke, then you shouldn't tell that joke. Because I do remember a friend of mine, Al Pitcher, who's a wonderful comic. Great. Oh, sorry, not Al Pitcher. Sorry, Jared Christmas. Wrong Kiwi. Jared and myself were doing the Birmingham Glee together, and he had a story that involved a dwarf in it. There was someone with dwarfism in it, and it wasn't like a cheap joke about it. It was genuinely talking about somebody having shit got at a train station, and basically them getting the upper hand on some stupid guard at the train station, if I remember rightly. But he sort of said he did the gig. I did the gig. It was interesting because there was someone with dwarfism, a dwarf in the room. And he was like, oh, should I do that? And I said, well, yeah, if you're happy to, because it's not like the piece of material wasn't bad. And he said, well, I'm going to, have to do it because, of course you have to do it because, and he did it. And its thing is, it didn't go well because the rest of the room, like the person who was a dwarf laughed, but the rest of the room were too socially awkward about, oh my God, are we allowed to laugh at that? Which you can genuinely have. I remember I had a couple of stories about racial sort of stuff based on loosely on things that happened myself with Elaine. And I can remember doing the stand in Newcastle, and there was a black dude in the front row. Do you remember this, Elaine? There was a black dude in the front row. I was telling us the zoo story about bringing our two nieces to the zoo, and thank God he laughed really loud at the first thing in it because the setup there, the whole room was really tense. And then, because the thing is, that's exactly the point. You can talk about race and racism. That is not the same as being racist. In fact, it's almost the exact opposite. But I remember talking to that guy afterwards and buying him a point because I remember saying to him, if you'd sat there stony-faced, you would have killed probably my career, never mind just this gig. And he was like laughing his head. He was a great guy, but he was very funny. But yeah, but it is one of those things that you just have to understand what you're doing and know the why of it, I guess.
There's a lot of Pratchett, and I mean that in the most. That's such a big compliment because it's just that thing of you hold up a mirror to the world.
Yeah, I mean that's what Pratchett did brilliantly. I've read pretty much every Terry Pratchett book, many of them. God, probably over 10 times some of them. And look, he's an enormous influence on me, not even just as a writer, but Pratchett's view of the world, I think, has frankly bled into me. Because he's such just a morally decent guy who just treated everyone the same sort of thing.
It's a really sort of fun thing because like there's so many amazing parallels because Ferguson is so veterinary. It's amazing.
Yeah, I guess he is in a bit. I mean, but he's more explosive as a person. Because weirdly, I'm literally writing a chapter with him right now. I'm halfway through one, which I'll be starting again in about 5 minutes.
And I find myself kind of going back to Ferguson chapters because he's just fun,
Yes.
and he doesn't give a shit, and he's so kind of explosive,
Yes.
but all-knowing and all-powerful in that very veterinary way, and also like Bunny is very Vimes,
Yes, Bunny is definitely very Vimes. I would say that, yeah.
and also Phil's very Carrot because he's a genius.
Yeah, but again, I think in a very different way. Phil's kind of like the sort of idiot savant where he kind of is incredibly stupid on some levels, but also is weirdly there's a type of stupidity that basically can end up being intelligence just by seeing the world from a very simple angle.
But there you go. That's neurodiversity. The fact that it's there is just because it usually isn't, and the fact that actually Phil gets the time and the space to be a genius, and also I think probably king of the folk, because there will be a crossover, and I will be right.
I mean,
I've decided.
Okay.
He's magic. He's definitely magic.
If there is anyone in the Bunny books who's magic, it'll definitely turn out to be Phil. I will give you that.
Yeah. And there's so much kind of awesome crossover in the Stranger Times with Irish mythology. I don't know whether I've read too much into it.
You can find parallels with lots of stuff. Like it's hilarious. Remember getting notes. Elaine's had these sort of things before where people have sent her emails, or she's sent me emails, but she's the one who reads them. And it's like, do you remember there's one like, oh, the thing about that is a very clever reference. And I was like, is it? It's like, was it? Okay. Like people do read far more into what you say sometimes than is actually there.
See, that's one thing that I'm just sort of going, nah, come on, Will, you're just obsessed with mythology and have read pretty much everything you can, and then whack on one of your books and then just go, that's that. Quiv's a genius. He sees it all. It's all there.
It's all tied together. That's a good way to tie up this interview. It turns out Quiv's an evil genius. There we go.
What's your sort of next thing off the taxi rank kind of thing?
Fortunate Son is the next Bunny book that's coming out in October, November-ish time, which is up for pre-order now. And then next year, there'll be another Stranger Times book. There will be the Ursula books coming out in German. We don't know when it's coming out in English. I'd imagine we're going to get some annoyed emails from people when they realize they can't get it in English. But yeah. It will eventually happen. Yes. And I'm sure there'll be another Bunny next year as well. So
anyway, I guess you've got to get back to it.
Yes, I do have to finish writing that book.
Thank you so much. And honestly...
Oh, it's been a delight. Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you for having us.
A big thanks to Will, Caimh and Elaine, and to you, our listeners, for tuning in. CK McDonnell's latest novel, Fortunate Son, is out on the 20th of November. Go to whiteheadirishman.com for details.